Jaromir Hladik, the author, was Prague-born, active between wars, never anthologized fully, but known for as many as 3 or 4 works, titles surviving intact more or less, that's including 1. The Notes for a Tragedy in verse titled The Enemies, 2. A translation of mystical texts from the Hebrew Kabbalah, 3. Of the Vindication, of Eternity, that one's in several volumes, and what was the last one? 4. An inquiry into the indirect Jewish sources referenced by Jacob Boehme. Philosopher claimed that he saw God once in a sunbeam. Was. Jaromir Hladik was on the night of the 14th of March. He was sleeping at home in the Old Town District, the 14th of March, 1939. He was dreaming. A chess game, so it seemed ancient in origin. No one knew what the prize was. Not even the 2 prominent families playing the game in the first place. Grand prize invaluable, or just infinite in value, maybe just infinite, nobody knew. But there was a board in a secret tower, and Jaromir's next move scheduled was imminent, because in the dream he was heir to the black cause. Clocks over struck at the hour, while our Jaromir Hladik took to his feet, running over the desert sands. It was raining, rainy desert sands, and he couldn't remember the game, the moves, or the squares, or the rules, knights, queens, kings, and the what? Pawns. Here I awoke, and the din of the rain and the clang of the clocks ceased, drowned by the waking noise of a measured unison marching. Sundered by voices commanding a damned Deutsch, dawn had arrived in armored forces, apparently entering Prague with the Third Reich. This was the 15th of March, and the end of our Czechoslovakia. Still, it took 4 days till the Gestapo got Jaromir Hladik. First thing the 19th, our newly appointed authorities gleaned some slight accusation against him, and dusk the same day he was taken. Dragged to a barracks, a septic and white crossed the bridge to the Moldau's opposite bank, where charge after charge left him impotent, helpless. Even the strongest defense couldn't change what was evident. My mother's maiden name, Yaroslavsky, was patently Jewish. My blood, Jewish. My inquiry into the indirect sources referenced by Boehme gave Lutheran theology, Hebrew ontology. Worst of all worst was the signature sign protesting the Anschluss. And this was enough for the work camp, sure, but what actually fucked me? Why I was dragged on this day from the desk in my room in the first place. Was that Kabbalah translation I did almost 10 years ago then. Sefer, Yetzirah, the 32 paths unto wisdom. He whose name is holy created this world with a story written in 22 letters plus 10 calibrations of blank space. Jaromir Hladik was just starting out, so his publisher thought, let's spruce up the blurb on the back of the book, and his publisher may have heaped the hyperbole, hyping superlatives, all to commercially bolster the young translator's reputation, painting him just noteworthy enough that it happened to capture the eye of a sadly well-read Nazi official named Julius Rothe some 10 years later. Now, most men, when out of their field, can be gullible. 2, 3, 10-year-old adjectives praising his prose was all that it took to convince this Nazi of Hladik's apparent preeminence and the need for the penalty death pour encourager les autres as a warning to others, a warning to others, a warning to others. March 29th, they set for the big execution. 9 in the morning. Just 10 days away, the 10-day delay due to formal request from Gestapo headquarters urging authorities act with at least the impression of cool restraint so deliberately common in cold vegetation or planets. Horrified, certain the gallows, the block, or the chair, or the knife were preferable to the torture of facing a firing squad. In vain I repeated it. It isn't the guns, but the sheer act of death I fear. But I just couldn't stop the relentless nightmare production numbers, exhausting absurdly the possible variance from the sleepless dawn to the discharge bang of the rifles. This non-stop terror of anticipation killed me countlessly, dying hundreds of deaths between the 10 days between the conviction and the corpse, shot down by changeable soldiers in courtyards whose shape and construction contradict simple geometry, regiments massive and modest, aiming deployed at a distance or blowing my brains out just point blank. These theoretical murders I faced with a tangible terror, cowardly sometimes, but sometimes courageously. Each simulation lasting mere seconds to augment the aggregate data set, looping death back to life, back to death, back to life, landing back in this cell, unraveling. Grasping at straw men, reasoning dubiously that reality rarely resembles predictive assumptions, so, ergo, logically forecasting some circumstantial detail is to thereby hinder its happening. Here is a feeble logic I blindly followed, inventing unspeakable carnage in hope that it might not happen. I naturally finished the exercise, fearing that just these cruelties were destined to take place. Wretchedly, Jaromir passed each night with the hope of maintaining some sense of that fugitive substance, time. Knowing perfectly well that time is indifferent, content to coldly careen itself closer and closer toward dawn on the 29th. Now is the night of the 23rd, and while this night persists, just 5 more to go, I'm invincible. Endless, a reason, my night sleep seeming my only escape. Oh, what sleep I can find in the first place. Sleep, like deep, dark pools into which I submerge myself blithely, finally numb to the frank realization, my craving the fatal cut to the gunner's definitive volley, to all of these futile mental compulsions. But night follows night, follows night, follows night, till sunset of March 28th, on the eve of my scheduled damning. Jaromir lay leaden, in no way consumed by the dawn's dim reckoning, nor by preemptive nostalgia for what one might call correctly the very last sunset I'd ever witnessed, but no. Thoughts were consumed by the one thing that mattered to Jaromir. Trivial maybe, but all I could think of was how I might end the one thing I left incomplete. My unfinished drama, the enemies. Clarinet was no longer young, and apart from a couple of friendships, also a couple of vices, the practice of writing was more or less the extent of his life. And in practice, his life was in process. Authors he rivaled, he judged by their published achievements, of course, but my work, he reasoned, was best understood through the lens of potential. All of the books he published so far left him filled with regret. My inquiry into the body of Burma is rote application. 32 Paths is Kabbalah by way of complacent translation. Maybe my old vindication had value. My volume on man-made structures of time and eternity merited some commendation. Charting Parmenides' thoughts on immutable beings to of late Charles H. Hitton's embrace of a changeable past. That's just volume 1. In the second is when I denounced the theory of time-based series, that all the events in the universe make up a causal linear history, radical really, but also preposterous. Arguing mankind's course is but finite, repeating routinely, each repetition asserting a temporal paradox. Though my rhetoric proposing the paradox proves paradoxically far-fetched. Hladek was always beset by some deeply perplexing polemic. There was a phase of expressionist poetry also, which Hladek hoped to forget, but which happened to linger overtly in several featured anthologies, partly why Hladek was anxious to forthwith salvage his earlier handling of verse by composing a drama. Wholly conceived in dactylic hexameter, titled The Enemies. Verse as theatric convention of alienation, of course, a tool of suspending the standard suspension of some disbelief so spectators can't just forget unreality. That's when it's good art. With the theatrical unities of time and of place and of action intact, Hladek's magnum opus transpires in Baron Romerstadt's library, one of the very last nights of the 19th century. Act 1, Scene 1. A stranger arrives at the Baron's home as the clock strikes 7 and sunset suffuses the room through windows through which some Hungarian music is heard from afar. This stranger is followed by others unknown to the Baron. Despite this needling suspicion, he's seen them all somewhere before, in a dream, perhaps in a dream. These visitors fawn and appease, but it's glaring, first to the audience, then to the Baron himself, that they're not friends. All of these strangers are actually enemies, secretly sworn to ruin him, Romerstadt's certain. And how he evades all their complex snares, so adeptly outwitting their intrigues and schemings and trip lines, some lines of dialogue later, we learn that the Baron is now engaged to a woman called Julia Weidenau, who herself was once courted by Jaroslav Kubin, a suitor who once went off the deep end and now can't distinguish himself from the Baron, thinks that he actually is Romerstadt Kubin the Baron. Dangers keep doubling. The end of Act 2 finds the Baron compelled to slaughter one of the unknown conspirators, dead as a door name. Act 3, here's where the incongruities actually mount up. Actors who seem to have vanished emerge once again. That man who'd been killed at the end of Act 2, he returns, resurrected, just for an instant, 'cause time, someone notices, isn't advancing. Clock strikes 7 as still that sunset suffuses the room through windows where still that Hungarian music is heard in the distance. Act 1 seems to repeat itself. Romerstadt seeming unfazed entirely. And here's where the audience starts to unravel the big twist. Romerstadt isn't the Baron. He's actually Jaroslav Kubin. Here he's in drama that's never in fact taken place. It's a treadmill, run-of-the-mill type delirium. Kubin unendingly lives and lives and relives and relives and relives and relives and relives and... Hladek had never considered to think if this tragical farce was pat or preposterous, sloppy or shrewd. Such a plot, it appeared, was simply the best, most appropriate template to downplay his flaws and foreground his talents, embodying somehow the chance of redeeming, strictly symbolically speaking, somehow, the salient meaning of his life. Act 1's already completed. Several scenes out of Act 3 also addressed, though the metrical scope of the project abets some endless revision. Perfecting each dactyl and spondee for 6 feet stand on a street corner paved in dactylic hexameter, each foot clad in a style that's either a dactyl or spondee, respecting pace, and depending on syllables meant to be stressed. It's an ancient formula. Homer and Virgil and Ovid, though probably more pragmatic and oral traditions that needed their poetry set down strictly according to easily summoned up patterns that fix heard language to memory, only in lieu of a still-to-be-written system of glyphic or glyptic orthography, basically drawn text. 2 more acts to complete, notwithstanding the imminent death knell. God, in the darkness, I pray to God, God, if I exist, God at all, if I'm not merely one of your cheap repetitions. It's as the author of this play. But to finish this drama, which may serve to justify me and also to justify you, I need 1 more, just a year more. Grant me that year, God, you to whom we owe time elemental. Now is the night of the 28th, my last and most wrenching, creeping tomorrow, a pace more pathetic than pretty. It's a miracle Hladek was able to sleep whatsoever, drowned in a dark, endless ocean of sleep. He is dreaming a dream now. Dreaming he'd hidden himself in the Clementine library, lost now. Lost in the stacks, he is browsing for books by their binding, but finding nothing but blindness. Poets, Homeric, a city besieged, Troy taken, Cassandra's last stand, the grand contraband, caught non-consensual, kept by the king Agamemnon, had nobody heeded her warnings. Tapping the titles, he trips on a tome to the tune of a trial, closing a new compilation of Kafka compiled by Max Brod. Managed to hop the last train out of Prague before books burned, bonfires built to consume all degenerate language could blot out ever more ignorant authors asleep when they should have been running. Soon, a librarian wearing a pair of dark glasses approached him, asking him quietly, "What are you looking for?" Hladek replied, "God. God is in one of the letters on one of the pages of one book out of the 400,000 editions enclosed in the archives." So the librarian wearing dark glasses related at last, "My father and fathers before him have sought for that letter," he said, removing his glasses. "You see, I've gone blind in the searching it." Hladek saw the librarian's dead eyes. "This atlas is useless," rattled a reader, returning a tome, which he handed to Hladek. Here is at random a page opened up to an insert of India. Caught in a curious rush of assurance, Jaromir Hladek touched at the tiniest letter displayed on this page of the atlas. Lo, disembodied, a voice said, "The time for your work has been granted!" later I awoke, and recalling Maimonides' credo that words dreamt, be they recited invisibly, clearly, and plainly, are God's words. Sunrise suffusing the room through the bars. It is dawn, 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 it is coming, and dawn is awaiting me here, is awaiting, dressed, I'm awaiting the soldiers who enter the cell shouting, "Get up!" When I imagined it, I half expected a labyrinth of cell block stairs and connecting stockades in the barracks beyond my confinement, menacing metaphors, right? But reality doesn't quite meet those trite expectations. Just one iron staircase is all that it takes to walk to the courtyard, where soldiers with unbuttoned uniforms mostly stand around a motorbike, testing its engine and arguing. It was 8:44 when the sergeant consults his watch. They are early. Wait until 9. They're nothing if not punctual. So, I sit on a pile of kindling as soldiers avert their eyes. To make it less awkward, a sergeant is offering a cigarette, but I don't smoke, but accepting it anyway out of politeness, maybe humility. Lighting it, I can see that my hands shake. Sky's getting gray, and the soldiers conversing as if I'm dead already. In vain, I'm attempting to think of the girl who inspired the character Julia Weidenau. Thinking of, she used to love someone. Smoking, and waiting, and wandering, and waiting, and... What was her name? Her name wasn't Julia. But sure, she was Julia. I left when she left me. She left me with Julia. Her name wasn't Julia. So why do I think of her now, of all times now? Fall in, the sergeants commanding the firing squad facing off against Jaromir awaiting the volley, but someone expressing fear that the blood's gonna stain the white wall of the barracks. Like last time, shouts out to Hladik to step from the wall, sounding less like an SS gun than a fussy photographer. Raindrops, a raindrop that graces Hladik's temple and slowly descends down my cheek as the soldiers aim. No last words, just the sergeant igniting his final command, fire! Here, the physical universe stood still. Rifles converged on Hladik with triggers immobile. The sergeant's arm overhung, outstretched, inconclusive, as cast on the flagstone a bumblebee's shadow froze in suspension. The wind and the rain, like a painting, had halted. Claddick attempted to shriek, he attempted to speak, to adjust his hand, but he realized he was paralyzed. Stillness and silence. I am in hell. He began to consider, I'm dead, this is death. He thought, this is madness. He thought. Time, it had come to a halt yet. If that were true, wouldn't also his thoughts have halted as well now? Testing the theory he implied, he repeated, not moving his stalled lips. Ultima cumai venit jam carmini citas. The fourth eclogue of Virgil, verbatim translation goes something like the last of Cumaean has come now, prophecy age, or more broadly, now it has come the last stage of the Cumaean prophecy. Itas, ending the sentence, completing the clause introduced by the first word, ultima, last of the ages. It's not quite intuitive Latin syntax, but darn if this hadn't confirmed his initial suspicion. Eerie enough, the experiment. What if the Germans were also sharing this sentient stillness? He wanted to ask them, but how? When he felt tired, he slept without closing his eyes, and on waking, nothing had changed. The world was still motionless, numb, with that raindrop dangling still to his cheek, and the bee and the cigarette smoke trapped where he had tossed it, and not ever blowing away, just stillness. More than a day had transpired when Cletton conclusively caught on. What had he asked Adonai to award him a year, just a year more? Well, it appeared his omniscience complied. What he had was a year. Sure, German ballistics would kill him, as fate had ordained, but in secret. 1 extra year would elapse in his mind twixt the order to shoot and curtains. A secret miracle, like a caesura observed in a score twixt notes marked unnoticeable, yet sustained by the orchestra. Twofold. Silence, collectively tacit. And granted for what? Just to what God? Finish the enemies? Bafflement passed into listlessness, passed into rage, resignation, then finally gratitude. What were his options? No means of writing but memory the meter adopted served useful. Mastering every hexameter forced him to arbiter each foot. Deftly his prose could have never prescribed with its shapeless expressions. God didn't matter, nor legacy, no one would see it, and who cares what they might say if they did? I don't know what they want, did I ever? Weaving the narrative foot after foot in his temporal labyrinth, rewrite the third act again, cut the fact that's symbolic. The clock out, window and music omit, keep it simple, no reason to hold back. Blindly omitting, convincing, reverting, he realized he loved these. Loving the courtyard, the barracks, the men with their rifles, their eyes so blue, like his Aryan eyes staring through those big blues, through the tight sight. Could it be right that before we were enemies, when I can see faces, the face, the one on the right is the Baron. He saw him different from how he imagined, but better, more beautiful, boundless, void of anxiety, quashing distraction, just verbal diffraction. Consonants didn't confound him the way that it had with Flaubert. Here, sound was the sole concentration, rejecting the wrath of a writ large written. He wrote till his drama was done, lacking only one word, this one single epithet, then it was done. When he found it, it was raining a drip down his cheek, he began to scream wildly.